Dolly Parton, the most powerful woman in Nashville, once uttered a statement filled with quiet humility. There's really only 3 real female singers in the world: Barbra Streisand, Linda Ronstadt, and Connie Smith. The rest of us are just pretending. And still, Connie Smith, the very woman held up in that praise, is also the one who sat in the shadows of and whispered that she wished her voice had existed. Why would someone whose
Anthem
debut
performance
hit
was
stayed
electric.
at number 1
The crowd
for
was
8
incredible.
weeks, who placed more than 30
we'll never
songs
forget.
in the top 40,
Oh, that was incredible.
You
and who
felt
was
it too?
inducted into the Country Music
Amazing.
Hall
I
of Fame,
did.
Let's
sink
do it
into such
again.
depths of
I'm ready when you
despair.
are.
It all began with a cold childhood marked by relentless beatings, with nights spent clutching her siblings and crying through divorces caused by the crushing weight of fame, and with severe bouts of depression where the smile on stage was nothing more than a fragile shell concealing a soul falling apart. All of it quietly gnawed away at the woman everyone believed to be unbreakable. Today we explore the tear-soaked yet hopeful journey of Connie Smith, a woman who proves that the quietest hearts are often the strongest. Connie Smith was born on August 14, 1941, in Elkhart, in a cramped house where rare laughter was drowned out by constant arguments and an ever-present sense of fear, something that would shape her life for many years afterward. Her family had as many as 14 children, but in that house, what appeared most often was not lullabies or children's laughter, but the sharp smell of alcohol and the unpredictable rages of her father, Hobart Meter. He was a severe alcoholic, and whenever the liquor took hold, violence became the most familiar language in the home. For Connie, childhood was not measured in years, but in long nights of holding her breath, waiting to see whether her father would be silent or erupt in fury that day. Her earliest memories were not tied to toys or school, but to the image of her mother Wilma being beaten until she lost consciousness. There were times when the children had to pull each other into a cold corner of the kitchen, huddling on the floor, not daring to cry out loud for fear of making the rage worse. Violence was not a rare incident, but a daily rhythm of life. Connie grew up in constant vigilance, learning to listen to every footstep, every door opening, every heavy breath in the night. Fear did not need to scream. It smoldered quietly, rooted itself in every cell, became part of who she was from a very early age. When Connie was 7 years old, her mother Wilma made a decision that may have saved her children's lives. Even though the price was another life just as harsh, she gathered the children and fled from her abusive husband, leaving Indiana for West Virginia, where she herself had grown up. There was no clear plan, no money, only a fragile hope that somewhere else at least they would no longer be beaten. That freedom quickly took shape as a dilapidated shack lacking everything in a poor, mountainous area, its tin roof riddled with holes. Winters in West Virginia cut to the bone. Food was scarce. Warmth came only from thin blankets. But Wilma still did everything she could to keep her children from going hungry. From elementary school onward, Connie had to work. She washed dishes, picked potatoes, did any job she could to add a few more cents to the family's income. No one in the house told her that childhood should be protected simply because there was no other choice. But in the midst of all that deprivation, Connie had one very specific, very childlike, and also very unusual
That anthem
desire.
performance was electric. The crowd was
She wanted to
incredible.
buy an old radio,
A moment
something that
we'll
to
never
her
forget.
at the time felt
Oh,
like a
that was
small
incredible.
door opening
You felt
to
it
another
too?
world.
Hey.
Amazing.
When Connie
did.
finally
Let's
managed
do it
to buy that
again.
radio,
I'm ready when you are.
music began to enter her life. In the evenings, when the children gathered around the weak fire, Connie turned the dial, and country music poured in like a form of comfort. Hank Williams with his aching voice, Kitty Wells telling stories of women's pain, and Gene Shepard singing. With resilient strength, all touched Connie's young heart. On freezing winter nights, when the entire shack sank into darkness, Connie sang lullabies to her younger siblings, using the melodies she had heard from that radio. There was no stage, no audience, only loneliness, and the responsibility of a child forced to grow up too soon. But it was in those moments that Connie's voice began to take shape, born from the need to be comforted and to comfort others. Later, in life, Connie would say that she did not remember learning how to sing, only that she needed to sing in order to survive. In a world that was not safe, Music was the only thing that never hit her, never abandoned her, and never demanded conditions. Then tragedy struck again. At 17, while Connie was cutting grass with an old lawnmower, a terrible accident happened. The blade swept across her leg, nearly severing it completely. In the panic, she fell hard and seriously injured her right arm, leaving it almost paralyzed. Doctors at the local hospital looked at her injuries and told her she might never use her hand normally again. For a young girl, it sounded like a life sentence. Connie lay in her hospital bed, with tears falling silently, wondering why life could be so cruel to someone who had never harmed anyone. But she did not know how to give up, because her entire childhood had already been a series of days when surrender was not allowed. During the long months of recovery, as her body endured pain, her soul turned toward music more than ever. She sang like a prayer to forget the pain and hold on to hope. Later, after partial recovery, she taught herself guitar simply to accompany her voice. There was no teacher and no big stage, only quiet resilience. In 1961, at only 20 years, old Connie entered her first marriage with Jerry Smith, a man who worked at a steel plant in Beverly. They soon had their first son, Darren Justin, born in 1963. Connie believed this would be the beginning of a peaceful life, where she could be a mother, a wife, and quietly nurture her musical dream. But like many attempts to escape the past, that happiness was heartbreakingly brief. Differences in values and the pressure of raising a young child fractured the marriage. They divorced just a few years later. Leaving Connie in her early 20s alone with a small child and without stable income, she moved back to rural West Virginia and began working at a refrigerator factory to support her son. Every morning, she woke before dawn, prepared Darren, left him with relatives or neighbors, and then endured long, exhausting shifts. The noise of machinery drowned out everything.
That anthem performance was electric.
When
The
she
crowd was
returned
incredible.
home, despair
A moment we'll never forget.
Oh,
The
that was
dream of
incredible.
singing
You felt it too?
impossibly
Hey.
distant.
Amazing.
I did.
Then,
Let's
in
do it again.
1963,
I'm ready when you
at
are.
the Franklin County Fair, Connie joined a small local performance just to test herself. When she began singing, the crowd that had been chatting suddenly fell silent. Her voice carried something rare, a deep emotional honesty that struck directly at the audience. Among them was Bill Anderson from the Grand Ole Opry. After the performance, he approached her and offered to help her record a demo. That demo became Once a Day. Released in 1964, the song climbed to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart and stayed there for 8 consecutive weeks, setting a record for a female country artist that lasted nearly 50 years, till broken by Taylor Swift. Suddenly, Connie Smith became a star. From the mid-1960s into the early 1970s, she released hit after hit. More than 30 songs entered the top 40, and 19 reached the top 10. Songs like Then and Only Then, Ain't Had No Lovin', Cincinnati, Ohio, and I Never Once Stopped Loving You poured out of radios across America. She became a regular performer at the Grand Ole Opry and one of the most respected voices in country music. Yet behind the success, her personal life continued to fracture. She married guitarist Jack Watkins briefly, then later Marshall Haynes, with whom she had 3 daughters. Touring pressures and emotional exhaustion strained every relationship. Depression slowly grew stronger, and there were moments when she stood on stage smiling while feeling completely empty inside. In 1968, she experienced a turning point when she embraced Christianity. Faith did not erase her struggles, but it gave her a sense of purpose and peace. She began recording gospel music and singing hymns, such as How Great Thou Art in Peace in the Valley in her concerts. By the late 1970s, ohmed by depression, Connie stepped back from the relentless music industry to focus on her faith and raising her 5 children. Years later, in 1997, she married Marty Stewart, a country singer 17 years younger who had admired her since childhood. Their marriage brought her the stability and unconditional support she had long searched for. In 2012, Connie Smith received one of the highest honors of her career when she was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. During the ceremony, Dolly Parton introduced her with the famous words, praising her as one of the greatest female voices in the world. Even in later life, Connie continued facing challenges. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she suffered severe illness, including sepsis and double pneumonia, but eventually recovered. In her 80s, she still appears occasionally at the Grand Ole Opry and on Marty Stewart's television program, singing hymns and classic country songs. Now in her mid-80s, Connie Smith lives a quieter life, surrounded by her children. Her voice may tremble more than it once did, but the sincerity that defined it remains untouched.
A moment we'll never forget.
Her legacy is not only in chart records
You felt
or
it too?
awards, but in the honesty she brought to country
Let's
music
do it again.
and the
I'm ready
comfort
when
her
you are.
songs have. Given 2 generations of listeners, Connie Smith did not become an icon because she avoided tragedy. She became an icon because she endured it, remained gentle, and continued to sing. Even after receiving one of the highest honors in country music, Connie Smith never saw herself as a legend. Fame had never truly felt natural to her. The applause, the bright lights, and the endless praise were things she accepted with gratitude. But deep inside, she remained the same quiet girl who once sang beside a weak fire in a cold shack in West Virginia. That humility stayed with her. Even when she stood among the greatest names in the Country Music Hall of Fame, what made Connie different from many stars of her era was the way she treated music not as a career alone, but as a form of emotional truth. When she sang about heartbreak, loneliness, or faith, listeners could feel that those emotions were not imagined stories but lived experiences. Her voice carried the weight of childhood fear, broken marriages, motherhood, depression, and survival. Because of that honesty, many people felt as though Connie was singing directly to them, giving words to feelings they had never been able to express. Throughout the decades, she continued to influence younger artists, singers such as Emmylou Harris often spoke about the emotional depth they heard in Connie's recordings. Patti Loveless admired the way Connie preserved the earthy, Appalachian sound while still thriving in Nashville's commercial world. Even artists from later generations like Miranda Lambert pointed to Connie as proof that strength in country music does not always need to appear loud or rebellious. Sometimes strength can sound soft, patient, and deeply human. Despite those accolades, Connie never fully escaped the shadows that had followed her since childhood. Depression remained something she spoke about openly in later interviews. She explained that emotional wounds do not simply disappear with success or age. What changes is how a person learns to live alongside them. For Connie, faith, family, and music became the pillars that kept her steady. Her marriage to Marty Stewart played a powerful role in that healing. Marty admired Connie not only for her talent, but for her courage and vulnerability. He often said that her voice carried a spiritual depth that could not be taught. Their relationship became a partnership built on mutual respect, music, and faith. Together, they performed on stage, recorded albums, and shared stories about country music history, creating an atmosphere that felt less like celebrity life and more like a quiet continuation of the traditions they loved, even as age brought physical challenges. Connie refused to abandon music completely. She continued appearing at the Grand Ole Opry, a stage that had been part of her life since 1965. When she stepped onto that familiar wooden circle, audiences were not just hearing a singer. They were witnessing a living chapter of country music. Her voice, though softer and sometimes
That anthem
trembling,
performance was electric.
still
The
carried
crowd was
the
incredible.
same emotional honesty
A moment
that
we'll
had
never
once
forget.
stunned a crowd at
Oh,
the
that was
Franklin County
incredible.
Fair.
You felt it too?
Decades
Amazing.
Earlier, the
I did.
pandemic
Let's
years
do it
brought
again.
another
I'm ready
frightening
when you are.
test.
Feel the fire
Like
burning
many
deep
older
within my
Americans,
soul.
Connie faced serious health risks when she contracted COVID-19. Complications including sepsis and double pneumonia placed her in critical condition. For a time, doctors were uncertain whether she would survive. But with treatment, prayer, and the constant presence of Marty by her side, she slowly recovered. The experience reminded her family and fans how fragile life can be, even for those who seem strongest. That recovery inspired new music. Her later recordings carried an even deeper spiritual tone, reflecting gratitude for survival and the quiet understanding that every day is a gift. Songs on albums like The Cry of the Heart, sounded less like commercial releases and more like personal testimonies. Listeners heard not only a singer, but a woman who had walked through pain and come out with compassion. Today, Connie Smith lives a peaceful life surrounded by her children, grandchildren, church community, and the man who stood beside her through the later chapters of her story. The spotlight that once felt overwhelming no longer controls her life. Instead, music has returned to the simple role it held when she was a child, a way to comfort the soul. Her legacy is not measured only by chart statistics, though those numbers are impressive. More than 30 top 40 hits, 19 top 10 songs. Decades as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. And recognition from the Country Music Hall of Fame place her firmly among the giants of country music. But the deeper legacy lies in something harder to measure. Connie Smith helped redefine what a female voice in country music could be. She sang about women who waited, endured, forgave, and sometimes broke under the weight of life. She showed that vulnerability could be powerful, that faith could coexist with doubt, and that softness did not mean weakness. In the end, Connie Smith's story is not simply about music. It is about survival. A frightened girl from a violent household found refuge in a small radio. That radio led to songs. Those songs led to a stage. And that stage carried her voice to millions of people who needed the same comfort she once needed herself. Even now, when she stands beside Marty Stewart and quietly sings an old hymn, the meaning of her journey becomes clear. The voice that once felt like a burden became a gift, not only to country music, but to anyone who has ever needed hope. And perhaps that is why the words of Dolly Parton still echo so strongly. When she said that there were only a few real female singers in the world, she was not only speaking about vocal ability, she was speaking about truth. Connie Smith's voice carried truth, and truth once heard never fades away.